شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين وصحابته المنتجبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد, brothers in Islam, brothers in Iman, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, another opportunity for us to meet once again and deliberate on issues that concern our life in general as a society. As a society, we've been meeting for the past days, deliberating on the issue of globalization and its effect on society. We've touched on many aspects of globalization. And definitely, we've gained some knowledge about many things, though in brief. Tonight, I'd like to talk about a very good article written by someone known as Professor Michel Chossudovsky. He's a very prominent personality and very much outspoken on the issue of globalization. The article that you see on the screen, he is the writer. On these articles, there is manufacturing dissent and manufacturing consent. If I'm not wrong, he's written a book about this subject. But before I get into this subject or quoting his writing, just to touch upon the issue that concerns the subject of globalization, but to some or many for that matter, might be their starting point towards understanding the issue of globalization, though that's not the reality. Most people, and even intellectuals, think or assume Berlin Conference was where it all started. Some move it to 1980s, others go back to 1920s, and so on and so forth. But I touch upon this subject about the Berlin Conference once again because this is the greatest undoing Africa's undoing. In more ways than one. The colonial powers superimposed their domain on the African continent. By the time independence returned to Africa in the 1950s, the realm had acquired a legacy of political fragmentation that could neither be eliminated nor made to operate satisfactorily. It was back in 1884, at the request of Portugal. Now note this, that Portugal is requesting the Chancellor of Germany, Otto von Bismarck, to call this conference. Now, when we touched on the historical aspect of the East African coast and the First World and the first globalization, we mentioned on how the Pope gave the doctrine of discovery to Portugal and Spain, and what the doctrine of discovery entailed in general. Now, Portugal is asking Chancellor Otto von Bismarck to call a conference, whereas Africans would never be invited, but to deliberate on spheres of influence in the continent of Africa. 14 nations attended that conference. Otto von Bismarck called together the major Western powers of the world to negotiate questions and end confusion over the control of Africa. Bismarck appreciated the opportunity to expand Germany's sphere of influence over Africa and desired to force Germany's rivals to struggle with one another for territory. But the most important thing is, by then, 80% of Africa was ruled by the indigenous people of Africa. 80%. But none of them was invited to the Berlin Conference. %80 was under traditional and local control. What ultimately resulted was a hodgepodge of geometric boundaries that divided Africa into 50 irregular countries. This new map of the continent was superimposed over the 1,000 indigenous cultures and regions of Africa. 1,000 indigenous cultures. Hence, you find Maasais in Tanzania and Maasais in Kenya. Luos in Kenya, Uganda, and Southern Sudan. Turkanas in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda, and so on and so forth. You have Digos in Tanga, but Digos in Kenya too. Fourteen countries were represented by a plethora of ambassadors when the conference opened in Berlin on November 15th, 1884. It took over 3 months negotiations among the 14, or between the 14 countries. Nations that attended or had ambassadors in this conference. Austria-Hungary, it was one nation. Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany, Great Britain, Italy, the Netherlands, Portugal, Russia, Spain, Sweden, Norway, unified from 1814 to 1905. Then, this is the funny part, Turkey and the United States of America, 14 nations. Why did I say this is the funny part? Turkey. Why did Turkey attend this conference? Before today, has anyone's mind been crossed by this idea that Turkey was one of the 14 states? And at this time, was the Ottoman Empire existing? That's the second question. Third question, did Turkey tell any Muslim nation in Africa or Muslim people that there's this going on in Berlin? And these guys are trying to get over the issue of having spheres of influence in Africa. Now, 1884, the Ottoman Empire was dismantled by 1924. Why did Turkey keep quiet over this issue? Of these 14, France, Germany, Great Britain, and Portugal were the major players in the conference, controlling most of colonial Africa at the time. At the time of the conference, only the coastal areas of Africa were colonized by the European powers. Only the coastal areas of Africa. They hadn't gotten into the interior. And most of the coastal areas were Muslim areas. The Berlin Conference managed to form a set of rules for the orderly extension of European influence in Africa. First, the 14 nations agreed there would be freedom of trade and navigation in the Congo Basin. Second, any power that annexed territory or established a protectorate from that day forward would let every other country know immediately. At the same time, that country was responsible for establishing political stability, thereby guaranteeing effective occupation of those regions. They also agreed to put a stop to the slave trade, that these territories may not serve as a market or means of transit for the trade in slaves or whatever race they may be. Now let's go back to the historical aspect, that slaves were only traded by Arabs, quote unquote, meaning Muslims. Whether someone knew about this or not, that was the main goal of making slavery being initiated by the Arabs. But 200 years before the Arabs stepped on this area, the Western countries were doing slavery heavy. The Gold Coast, that's West Africa, and the East African coast. They killed more people than Hitler did to the Jews. There's a saying that goes, King Leopold II of Belgium as he was controlling Congo Basin, when he found the population there in total, by the time they achieved independence, half of that population was wiped off. That is, if they were 6 million, then he killed 3 million people. And this was due to industrial revolution. They were looking for rubber plantations. They came in as businessmen, brought in explorers who were bishops or cardinals or archbishops and all this, and they went around Africa discovering places where Africans were living. Now, that is the negative side of globalization. They found us living positively, well-civilized people, relationships with people as far as the Far East. They fought that globalization and put it off. We'll go back to the issue of Turkey as we go by, or as we go on with these lectures. Now back to Professor Michel Chossudovsky. I like the way he starts this first paragraph. And I'd like to quote as you are seeing it on the screen. He says, everything the Ford Foundation did could be regarded as making the world safe for capitalism. Reducing social tension by helping to comfort the afflicted, provide safety valves for the angry, and improve the functioning of government. Quoted from McGeorge Bundy, National Security Advisor to Presidents John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson, 1961 to 1966. President of the Ford Foundation, 1966 to 1979. Then he quotes again someone else, Paul Kivel. By providing the funding and the policy framework to many concerned and dedicated people working within the non-profit sector, the ruling class is able to co-opt leadership from grassroots communities and is able to make the funding, accounting and evaluation components of the work so time-consuming and onerous that social justice work is virtually impossible under these conditions. Paul Kivel. Now this is where it gets more heavy. Under the New World Order, the ritual of inviting civil society leaders into the inner circles of power while simultaneously repressing the rank and file serves several important functions. First, it says to the world that the critics of globalization must make concessions to earn the right to mingle. A good example is in Kenya right now. The civil society is confused in Kenya, not knowing where to go, most of them. They almost supported Raila Odinga when he was succeeding in demonstrating. But then the president took a fast action and said, no, let's sit and dialogue. Now they are confused. They don't know where to go, the civil society. So when they are invited, it's sort of silencing them. The writer puts it in the best words. Second, it conveys the illusion that while the global elites should, under what is euphemistically called democracy be subject to criticism, they nonetheless rule legitimately. And third, it says there is no alternative to globalization, fundamental change is not possible, and the most we can hope is to engage with these rulers in an effective give and take. Let's go down to global political awakening, corporate power. I've quoted this. Then there is the New World Order, which is the biggest and most dangerous terrorist group in the world, want to kill 7.3 billion people. They have stated their intentions very clearly, carved in stone in 12 different languages. By providing the funding, I've quoted this at length, Paul Keevel. So what next? So warning, mass confusion ahead. Why mass confusion ahead? Because it's the New World Order. Again, quoted it extensively. So, where are we heading to? Objective is we want youth. They're aiming at the youth of this world. Why and who are these people? They are the globalizers. While they adopt a few progressive phrases to demonstrate they have good intentions, the fundamental goals are not challenged. And what this civil society mingling does is to reinforce the clutch of the corporate establishment while weakening and dividing the protest movement. Most of you find NGOs and civil societies sort of enlightening you for some time, awaiting a moment that they'll be signaled to be ready time for you to come out and protest. But if civil society and non-governmental organizations are put into the movement collectively, then there'd be no more protests. In other words, they act as tools for the corporate power. And the corporate power funds them, whether consciously or unconsciously, the NGOs and the CSOs become aware or not. It's the corporate power that funds NGOs and CSOs. Where does the money come from? And why would they fund them? Human rights issues, AIDS, COVID-19, poverty, small micro-enterprise, awaiting the order to come like, no, let's go this way now. And here they'll come. That's why Malcolm X says, the media, the most powerful entity on earth, they have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent, and that power. Because they control the minds of the masses. How many of us have imagined waking up a day when there is no internet? What would be the situation? Have you ever thought about it? You wake up one day, there's no internet for the whole day. Can you see how chaotic the situation would be? Call one another. You see these guys, one. There's no internet, one. There's no, you're checking WhatsApp, nothing. Checking email, no way. You want to browse the internet, no way. That's mind control now. And that's part of globalization. That's 5G. Electromagnetic frequency. This rank and file and some of their leaders as well are to be applauded, but we need to go further. We need to challenge the right of the globalizers to rule. And this is where institutionalization comes in. If we institutionalize our way of life, globalizers can never control us. We'd be controlling our destiny. And they won't be able to tell us, let's go this way or that way. George Curzon, the British Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, 1911 to 1921, look at what he said. We must put an end to anything which brings about any Islamic unity between the sons of the Muslims. As we have already succeeded in finishing off the caliphate, so we must ensure that there will never arise again unity for the Muslims, whether it be intellectual or cultural unity. Don't forget they met at Berlin. They're one of the participants when they were controlling a big part, a big chunk of Africa. That's Great Britain. Remember this saying, we the English people have to make mischief and arouse schism in all our colonies in order that we may live in welfare and luxury. Only by means of such instigations will we be able to demolish the Ottoman Empire. Otherwise, how could a nation with a small population bring another nation with a greater population under its sway? Look for the mouth of the chasm with all your might and get in as soon as you find it. You should know that the Ottoman and Iranian empires have reached the nadir of their lives. Therefore, your first duty is to instigate the people against the administration. History has shown that the source of all sorts of revolution is public rebellions. When the unity of Muslims is broken and the common sympathy among them is impaired, their forces will be dissolved, and thus we shall easily destroy them. Anybody comes to tell you about these things, is this a coincidence? If you know that these things have been happening and have been pre-planned since these times, 1911, 1921, yet we are relaxing, unaware that people are planning against our faith. That's why I said silent weapons for quiet wars. Not me. Go to your browsers, go to Google, just write silent weapons for quiet wars. Read all the articles you'll find about silent weapons for quiet wars. Now, to know the truth, you need to be on the truth, on the level, at par. You need to update your mind, your heart, because before you come out and see the truth, you need to recognize which lie is holding you. As a society, not a community, as a society, do we know the lie that's holding us? We are being held hostage by a lie. What lie is this? The lie that we know much, yet we don't. Now, these things are not from me. They're not from my family. They're not from my late father. These are in their own books. But do we love reading? Do we research on these issues? Do mosques have these references? Show me one masjid that keeps such books for you to go and read. Mosques that have libraries that can bring youth together with the old, the young, men, women, together somewhere where they can read, where they have such screens for them to be coming and being shown things that would open up their minds and hearts. Because that's where the war is being fought, with silent weapons for quiet wars. They are fighting the minds and hearts of Muslims and non-Muslims, any established religion. And we are falling into that trap. What are the tools that they use for this war? Words, sounds, and pictures accomplish little unless they are the tools of a soundly thought out plan and carefully organized methods. You remember the video I showed you yesterday of Louis Farrakhan? What he was saying about that director he met? The fear he has for trends that are swaying people from their trends. How they organize themselves and replan the whole issue. They think about 50 years to come. Where would this population be in as far as mentality is concerned? They make movies for you that they don't check. They don't let their families check those movies. They spend billions of dollars. That's why they say words and sounds, that is lyrics in songs or movies and pictures. That's where the movies come in. Accomplish little unless they are the tools of a soundly thought out plan and carefully organized methods. If the plans are well formulated and the proper use is made of them, the ideas conveyed by the words will become part and parcel of the people themselves. If there's a good football match, then few would attend lectures. If you keep lectures during the World Cup, you get few people to attend your lectures. If you keep a lecture when Manchester United is playing Arsenal or Chelsea, then few people would attend your lectures. If you keep your lecture when Manchester City is playing Liverpool, few people would attend your lectures. Now here are the planners. They are talking about how they plan to conquer your minds and hearts. When the public is convinced of the soundness of an idea, it will proceed to action, which is suggested by the idea itself, whether it is ideological, political, or social. But such results do not just happen. They can be accomplished principally by the engineering of consent. Now there's manufacturing consent and manufacturing dissent. Now these are people who sit down and think, how will we sway the population? How will we sway the people of this earth to conform with what we plan to make them be? It's not a coincidence that crime movies, drug abuse movies, and free sexual play movies are sent to us. Boys in the Hood, the youth may know about these movies. Menace to society. But the way they write it, they write menace, and then there's two, the Roman two, society. So if this is menace 2, which was menace 1? Drive-by shooting. When you buy a knife, when you buy a gun, you don't go shoot someone who's not from your own community. You kill your own community. They show it in movies, and you copy the movies. You talk like the actors in the movies and actresses. You dress like them. You comb your hair like them. This is how they plan the whole thing. Imam Ali says our enemies are not the Jews or the Christians, our enemy is our own ignorance. And this is where we are. We are an ignorant people. We ignore so many things that hurt us badly. I take you back to the Berlin conference. Turkey sat on the table while administering Muslim areas. Why didn't he come back and tell Muslims these guys are planning this thing? Now you see why the European Union still needs Turkey as a friend in the European Union. Consider him as a brother in the European Union. What did Turkey do to the Muslims? Was he a sellout? Technological revolution. I just want to come to this one, maybe I'll go on tomorrow, but just as a passing comment. The technological revolution, or technotronic revolution, as Brzezinski termed it in 1970. 1970, 53 years ago. Involves two major geopolitical developments. The first is that as technology advances, systems of mass communication rapidly accelerate, and the world's people are able to engage in instant communication with one another and gain access to information from around the world. In it lies the potential and ultimately a central source of a massive global political awakening. Simultaneously, the technological revolution has allowed elites to redirect and control society in ways never before imagined, ultimately culminating in a global scientific dictatorship, as many have warned of since the early decades of the 20th century. Scientific dictatorship. Now this is 53 years ago. Aren't we there yet? The COVID menace, the 5G menace, aren't we there yet? Aren't we there at the scientific dictatorship? That's why I was asking if they just put off the internet for a day. Can you imagine how chaotic the situation is going to be? Those with hypertension, those who are diabetic. It just goes up or down straight away when you realize there's no internet. Hence, if we are fighting each other, we can't fight the enemy. and we are in this situation. We fight each other. We don't know each other, but we fight each other for the sake of those who know one another, but don't fight each other. They call them hybrid wars. Color revolution, unconventional wars. Fight them in regions, in community, in countries. New form of aggression, geoeconomic wars, and so on and so forth. These things you won't believe, but it's time we change the situation. High time we change the situation. I'll end up by showing you this, and maybe inshallah, if Allah allows us another chance to live, we'll come and speak about this thing.
Told that they are the most important resource of this organization. Since December 2015, the staff here at the Vienna International Center have been exposed to off-the-scale electromagnetic radiation from Wi-Fi and mobile phone boosters installed on very low ceilings throughout the buildings. Current public exposure levels are at least 1 quintillion, that's 18 zeros, 1 quintillion times above natural background radiation, according to Professor Olle Johansson of the Karolinska Institute in Sweden. The highly dangerous biological effects of EMFs have been documented by thousands of studies since 1932, indicating that we may be facing a global health catastrophe orders of magnitude worse than those caused by tobacco and cigarettes. Mr. Secretary General, on the basis of the precautionary principle, I urge you to have these EMF-emitting devices removed immediately from these buildings and to call a halt to any rollout of 5G at UN duty stations, because 5G is designed to deliver concentrated and focused electromagnetic radiation in excess of 100 times current levels in the same way as do directed energy weapons. In line with the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, to protect, respect and remedy, 5G technologies must be subjected to an independent health and safety assessment before they are launched anywhere in the world. There is currently an international appeal signed by 237 EMF scientists from 41 nations urging the UN and particularly the WHO to exert strong leadership in fostering the development of more protective EMF guidelines, encouraging precautionary measures and educating the public about the considerable health risks, particularly the risks to children and fetal development. Mr. Secretary General, I think we have a unique opportunity here at the UN office at Vienna. Since our medical records are digitized, you have the choice and the possibility of releasing data on a closed population exposed to off-the-scale levels of electromagnetic radiation in a metal-walled building, which exacerbates the situation, to establish if there have already been abnormal health consequences for the UN staff here in the last 28 months. I urge you to do so and stop any rollout of 5G immediately. Thank you.
Sorry, because we are talking with someone that is a little bit ignorant on these things. We're talking to the Wi-Fi systems?
On the ceilings of these buildings, Wi-Fi boosters and cell phone boosters were installed without consultation, without information to staff in December 2015. The situation here is extremely dangerous. I have heard anecdotally of many people who have had health problems. I don't know if they are related, but the precautionary principle would dictate that we use our medical records to look into this and that we remove these dangerous devices immediately. Thank you.
Well, I become worried because I put those devices in my house.
Not a good idea.
This I will have to, I confess my ignorance on this. We will have to, but I'm going to raise this with WHO, which I think is the organization that might be able to deal with it properly, for them to, put someone, their staff or organizations to work on that, because I must confess I was not aware of that danger. To the extent that I put those things in the rooms of my house, in the ceiling.
That is the United Nations. That is the truth about 5G. The letter that she mentioned, the appeal is here. I urge you, brothers and sisters, this is the 21st century. If you want to talk or listen to issues being explained, someone has to provide substantive evidence. It's no time for sitting at a place for an hour talking things that can never be substantiated. You need to provide proof of what you are saying. This is the new wave of lecturing or keeping a majlis somewhere and people come and listen to you. Even if it's hadith or ayah, then let it go on the screen so that people see it's authentic. I talk about this, and there's an audio on the same, but we'll go on to that maybe tomorrow if we are still alive. I mentioned to you about these two, and here it goes. How many times have you bought these candies for family? I know it's not easy to reply. Mind you, it's not even pig fat or pig meat, it's pig skin. They make those candies. And we go into supermarkets and buy those candies for our kids, not knowing what's the content.
From the clothes we wear to the cars we drive. From what we use to look good to what we use to relax. Our lives are full of products, and our products are full of animals. Could knowing that so many of our favourite items contain animals change the way we feel about them forever? Tonight, it's the pig.
can't even see the blood. Look at the scale. Oh my gosh. Mine's got scissors and
minutes, the pig and his skin have parted company, and the skin is ready to go off to the tanning factory. Luxurious leather.
Eating the pigs, and for the rest of the pieces we are getting the leather, and after that you can buy fancy goods like shoes, bags, fancy leathers and stuff like that. Here we've got the fatting machines.
We looked at this yesterday, no need of repeating it. I'm ending up my lecture tonight to say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.